Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Becky Robinson, and I'm so thrilled to be here today with Mark Miller. I can see that many of you are coming into the webinar quickly, and we will be getting started in just a few minutes. Hey, Mark, welcome.
Well, it's good to be with you today.
So, as you're coming in, we would encourage you to go ahead and find the chat. And when you do that, we'd encourage you to use the drop down menu to select everyone so that all the attendees and the panelists can see your comments. We would learn where you're calling in from today geographically. And then also, if you happen to be calling in today as a representative of your workplace and you're hoping to get some professional development that you can share with your peers, we would love to also give you a shout out for your organization. So feel free in the chat to tell us where you're calling in from and then also what organization you represent. Wow, and those are all coming in so fast. Thank you and welcome in Arkansas, Wisconsin, Chicago, Delaware, Texas. Welcome to the folks at Chesapeake, Virginia, Southeastern Virginia Training Center. Mark Rickloy in Tennessee says, hi, we have our friend Bob Teedy on the line. Welcome in Utah, in California, in Romania, in Virginia at the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. We've got Memphis, Tennessee, Roanoke, Virginia, Leaders Q Coaching. North Carolina Great Commission Training Ministries. Mark from Crew in Orlando, Florida. We've got folks in California, Ontario. These are coming in so fast.
I was gonna say I can't read that fast. I think
no, I can't. We're gonna have to catch up.
London, yeah.
I see Belgium.
Paris.
So welcome to all of you from around the world and for choosing to make an investment in learning about leadership. I've got Moldova now as well. Wow, a truly international audience, and we look forward to a great hour of learning with you. For those who haven't had a chance yet to put your eyes on this brand new book from Mark Miller, it is launching tomorrow, and we're so excited to be able to share the key concepts of the book with you today. So throughout today's broadcast, we would love to be able to interact with you. I know, Mark, you're going to be throwing some questions out and wanting to get people's responses and interaction. So please continue to use the chat. And also toward the end of the call, we will have some available time for Q&A. Now, Mark, before we dive in too far, can you tell us a little bit about where you're calling in from today? It looks like a really interesting setup there.
Well, it is a great space. It's our studio here at Chick-fil-A where we make our TV commercials. And when I came in this morning, I realized it was available. Lighting's pretty good. The acoustics are great. So here we are from the Chick-fil-A studios.
Amazing. So for those of you who may not know Mark Miller, I've loved getting to know Mark over the past more than a decade, but he's been out there serving leaders for many more years than that. He's an international best-selling author, and this is his 10th book. And Mark has been serving leaders at Chick-fil-A for over 40 years. His current role is as Vice President of High Performance Leadership. So Mark, we're so thrilled to have your wisdom today, and we look forward to learning from you and with you. And I'll be back with you later in the broadcast for some Q&A.
Becky, thank you for pulling all this together. And given the diversity of our attendees, I don't know if I should say good morning, good afternoon, or good night. But I'm so thankful that we've got people from all over the world to talk about smart leadership. So let's begin by thinking about the last 20 plus months. I know you probably don't want to start there, but I think it's the perfect context for what we're going to discuss here today. So what I'd love for you to do in the chat is type a word or a phrase that represents some of the challenges that you've encountered over the last almost 2 years. Let's see what we've got here. Turmoil, rapid change. Hello from Illinois. Oh, okay. Accountability, less travel, some isolation. Boy, howdy. Remote work, a lot of unknown, weariness. Okay, goodness. Yes. Yet we're all living in the same global pandemic, regardless of where you are calling from today. And it has been crazy. Well, let me say this. The work that we're about to review was begun before the pandemic, but we think it's still true. In fact, it's probably more relevant today than when we began the project. As our team began to look at the plight of leaders literally around the world. Now, this was several years ago. We said more and more leaders are struggling. And as we began to collect a list of all of the things that were encumbering leaders, we decided to call it quicksand. We thought that was a perfect metaphor for what leaders were dealing with pre-pandemic. And I would just argue that the pandemic has intensified it. It's made it even harder to escape its grips. Now, let's stay with this quicksand thing for just a few minutes here. If you find yourself in quicksand, I think a couple things are true. One, you probably didn't go there on purpose. I don't know any leader who said, hey, let's go and jump in the quicksand today. Yet we find ourselves there from time to time, and many find themselves there often. Another thing you may find in quicksand is a real sense of loneliness. I saw isolation was one of the things that came up on this quick survey here. You just feel lonely. You might feel helpless. And it's a formidable force. I think that's another thing that once we come to grips, no pun intended, with the reality of our circumstances, we realize that this is no joke. Now, quicksand is not a new idea. I said it's been exacerbated and intensified by the pandemic, but it was with us before. Even going back to the research that we started several years ago, we encountered several bits of trivia. So let me give you some of this just to paint broader context. Most of us open our phones 150 times a day. And when we do, we swipe, click, like, or love 2,617 times. On average, we receive 94 text messages a day. And there are 432,000 hours of new content uploaded every day on YouTube. That's a lot of content. Now, you throw in this whole thing of distractions. There's research that indicates if you work in an office environment, some of us can remember that, back in the day, we worked in an office, you're interrupted on average every 3 minutes. Now, you probably say, gosh, I'm interrupted more than that. And you learn to cope. Well, yes, cope is the right word, because here's the challenge with all those interruptions. Psychologists tell us that it takes on average 20 minutes for us to regain the focus, clarity, and mental acuity that we had before the interruption. So you know where I'm headed with this. If you're interrupted every 3 minutes and it takes 20 minutes to recover, we go through an entire day working without full focus. Now, as we begin to collect these factoids about this quicksand, and we continue to talk with leaders, we had some leaders say, well, I hear all that, but that's not my quicksand. Those aren't really my problems. So we began to ask a different question. We said, what are the things that are holding you back? What are the things that are limiting your impact? Well, that opened the horizon for the responses we began to hear. We heard other things. We heard things like fear, fatigue, even success, aimlessness. So we just decided to put all of that stuff in our quicksand bucket. So let me tell you where we went next. We said, we want to figure out how the best leaders get out of the quicksand. Because you probably know men and women, and I hope many of you are in that category. You're aware of the quicksand, but you just don't go there. And if you find yourself in it, you get out pretty quick. Well, that sounds great, but a lot of folks have not yet figured out how to escape the quicksand. In fact, they're faced with a couple of other options. You only have three when you find yourself in quicksand, and the first is to sink, just to give up, to die. Now, you may not physically die, but your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations can be extinguished in the quicksand. You just give up. I think that's a part of this mass wave of resignations we're seeing around the world. A lot of people, men and women, who are saying this is just too hard. The second option, which most leaders take, is they swim in quicksand. I mean, you know how to lead, right? So you just continue to do the stroke. You continue to do the kick, and you continue to get your breath, and you keep moving. In fact, it might be part of your DNA that you think, well, I've got to keep swimming. I'm the leader. And there's something admirable about that, but you're never going to win a gold medal swimming in quicksand. It's exhausting. It is not sustainable. I think it's one of the primary causes of burnout. So You can either sink, you can swim, or you can escape. And that is the focus that we ended up taking with our research. How do you get out? How do you escape? And that's what we're going to talk about, the balance of our time here. So I was reminded of a story from the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, I shared this with some young people recently, and they had no idea. So for the young people on the call, you might need to Google this. It was a great series of movies. Harrison Ford was the star. He was an adventurer, an archaeologist, and he was a pretty amazing guy. So in the movie I'm referencing, he was in search of the Holy Grail, the mythical and mystical cup of Christ from the Last Supper. And as legend has it, anyone who drank of the cup would never die. And so Indiana is looking for it. So this, I believe, was the climactic scene in the entire movie. He finds a cave that is full of cups, and there's a knight there who's been guarding the cup for over 700 years, which of course plays right into the legend that he's obviously been taking a sip here and there. And so Indiana comes in, sees all these cups, and he's trying to decide which one he should drink from. At that moment, the bad guy shows up, and the bad guy wants the cup as well. So Indy doesn't really have any choice but to give the decision, to give the choice to the bad guy. So he surveys all the cups, and he chooses the most beautiful cup. It's gold, it's bedazzled, it's got jewels all over it. And he grabs that cup and he takes a drink. And in just an instant, he dies a horrific death. And the knight, who's observing all this, says that he chose poorly. Indiana now has his turn. He looks around and he sees a different cup. He sees a very simple cup, hand carved, wooden. He said, now that's the cup of a carpenter. The knight says, you have chosen wisely. You know, that's actually what we discovered as we studied all these leaders, is that our success ultimately hinges on our choices. Our choices give us agency. They give us responsibility. They give us opportunity. Our choices matter so, so much. So we wanted to figure out which choices mattered the most. I mean, as you can imagine, not all choices are created equal. Certainly. I mean, you would know that instantaneously. Right. So we said we want to focus on what we call smart choices. Those that do require a little more energy, but they yield a much, much larger return. Think of them like keystone choices. Think of a domino effect. If you'll make these choices, it will create other positive choices and outcomes in your life. So we're going to do a quick flyby here. I'll try to give you some real tactical and practical things. We want to save some time for Q&A at the end. But the good news for all of us is we discovered 4 choices. So when Socrates was a young man, he was approached by a would-be student. And the guy approached him and said, would you help me find knowledge? And so Socrates said, come on, let's take a walk. And so they start walking. They're walking along the beach. And all of a sudden, much to the man's surprise, Socrates starts to walk out into the water. Well, he was a bit confused, didn't know what to do next. So he thought he would follow his would-be mentor. And so they get out in the water. They're standing there. They're this deep. And Socrates said, now tell me again what you want me to do for you. And the young man said, I want you to help me find knowledge. And Socrates grabbed him by the shoulders, pushed him under the water and held him there, and then let him up. The man's coughing and spitting and like dazed and confused. And Socrates said, now tell me again what you want me to do for you. And he said, I said, I want you to help me find knowledge. And as legend has it, Socrates grabbed him again and pushed him back under the water and held him there even longer. Well, you can find numerous accounts of this throughout history, and somewhere between 4 and 7 times, Socrates did that, each time holding him underwater longer than the previous time. The last time the young man emerged, and Socrates said, "What is it you want?" He said, "I want air." And Socrates said, "When you want knowledge as bad as you want air, you will find it." Well, I want to paraphrase that to introduce our first choice. Our first choice is to confront reality. When you, as a leader, want reality as bad as you want air, you will find it. You will find it. Max Dupree, the legendary CEO of Herman Miller, said that the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. We cannot lead from a position of strength if we're not grounded in truth. So this might lead to the question, well, confront reality in which areas of our life? Well, I'm going to flip that question to you. Let's go back to the chat. Tell me, which areas of your life do you think it would make sense for you to be grounded in the truth of reality? Let's see some examples. What would you like to have crystal clarity regarding in relationships, spiritually, job performance? Yeah. I'm trying, purpose, real clarity, identity in Christ, financial, leadership, personal growth, all areas. I like that answer. Okay. So let me see if I can shed a little light on this. There are so many areas that the more we're willing and able to confront reality, the better we will lead. But it's hard. And we're not even going to go into all the reasons that it's hard. But let me give you a strategy and some tactics that will help you confront reality. I would encourage you to seek out fresh eyes. Fresh eyes. Men and women who can speak truth and help you identify reality. They're going to have a unique perspective. They're going to bring good ideas. They're going to challenge your assumptions. You really need to consider fresh eyes as a strategic approach to confronting reality. So you say, well, okay, well, how do I do that? So I'm going to run through some tactics here again, just so you have some ideas. These aren't new, but the big question is, are you using these tactics in your life and leadership? So how about a personal board of directors? Again, some of you are CEOs, you've got a real board of directors. Well, that's great. And they're a constant source of wisdom and coaching and feedback and perspective. But for men and women who aren't CEOs, we have to seek out our own board of directors. Who are the folks you'd like to have around the table, even if it's a virtual table, to help you make decisions, to give you perspective? You may want to enlist a personal board of directors. How about a coach? How about a coach? Somebody to speak truth into your life. I've had several coaches over the years, and I've had coaches in different arenas of my life, and they always bring fresh eyes. And the good ones will tell you the truth. How about consultants? Some of you are in a position to hire consultants. I love consultants. Every time I hire a consultant, a couple of things happen. One is we do better work because I've hired some wicked smart people with fresh eyes to come in and speak to the situation. But I get smarter along the way. Maybe you should hire some consultants. Or how about a mentor? Now, we don't have time to go deep on this, but you think about, well, what's the difference in a coach and a mentor? Basically, you're paying a coach and a mentor does it for free. Now, there's some methodology things and some professional coaches might challenge me, but fundamentally, I've had mentors and coaches and they do very similar things. Are there men and women that you could invite into your life to help mentor you on specific areas? I think there probably are. And then the last idea I'll share here is, how about peers? I'm part of a leadership development group that we started, I guess we're in our 23rd, maybe our 24th year, and there are 10 of us, and we meet twice a month, and we're trying to become better leaders. And we give each other perspective. We give each other fresh eyes on the problems and challenges and opportunities that we face. If you're not part of a group like that, you could start one today. The second smart choice is to grow capacity. Grow capacity. You've got to be able to meet the demands of today and tomorrow. And there are several strategies. We're not really going to just skip the stone across the surface is all we can do today. But one has to do with cleaning up your calendar. Drucker used to say 100 years ago that he had never met a knowledge worker, which is me and you, that couldn't eliminate 25% of the stuff on their calendar with no ill effect. Now, I don't know what that number is for you, but there's stuff on your calendar that you could clear out. And when you do, you grow capacity. How about your personal energy? What are you doing to steward, manage, and maintain your energy? What are you eating? How much are you sleeping? What are you drinking? I mean, we have an impact on our own energy, and we can grow that capacity. But here's the one I want you to think about specifically. And this was, I think, one of the big findings from our research, that it's not new, but it came through with such clarity. Smart leaders grow capacity by building margin in their life. Now, I know for some of you, you're reaching to disconnect from this webinar. Please don't stay with me for just a minute. If you're in quicksand, particularly if you've been there a long time, the idea of margin is the last thing you want to hear, and you think I've lost my mind. Well, maybe I've lost my mind. Some people don't even debate that. But for centuries, in fact, going back a couple thousand years, we can find great leaders that build margin into their life, into their calendar, into their routine. I had somebody just recently tell me I had lost my mind. They said, "You don't know what I'm going through." I said, "No, I don't." They said, "I don't have time for a vacation." I said, "Well, hold on. I'm not talking about a vacation. You may or may not need a vacation. I'm talking about margin as a discipline, as a leadership discipline." And they said, "What are you talking about?" Stephen Covey reminded us that public victory is always preceded by private victory. And the research on this is clear and compelling. Harvard just finished a 12-year study. CEOs on average spend 28% of their time in a given work week alone. I would tell you the time you spend alone is where you add the most value for your organization. Again, that feels nonsensical to some of you. Well, let me define margin. Margin is dedicated time. You ready for this? Dedicated time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan. That is the essence of your job. You're trying to take people from here to there. You're trying to help them conquer a preferred future. If you don't have time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and plan, you can't do your job. You say, "But I'm in quicksand." Well, maybe that's the first thing you need to reflect, assess, think, create, and plan, is how to get out of the quicksand. But you say, "I'm just too busy." Listen, I know the president of a multi-billion-dollar company who was recently appointed president, and he said the first thing he did was double the amount of time he was spending alone. I think that's wise. You say, "Well, how much time should I spend?" Look, here's what I'd tell you. The bigger your dream, the bigger your aspiration, the bigger your responsibility, and the bigger your challenge, the more time you need to spend in margin. And I want to challenge you. Two hours. Find 2 hours next week. If you've never experimented with this discipline, that'll be a great start. Put it on your calendar. And when somebody calls and says, "Hey, can you meet next Thursday at 2:00? You look at your calendar and you say with full integrity, "No, I'm sorry, I've already got a meeting scheduled." And what are you going to do in that meeting? You're not going to do email. All right. This is not time for busy work. This is not time to catch up. This is time to reflect, to assess, to think, to create, and to plan. I think you'll find this to be the most valuable time of your entire work week. Smart leaders make the choice to grow capacity. Third, I've been asked for a long time in different languages, even over the years, about how do you lead for the long term? How do you lead for the long haul? Some have even said, is there a fountain of youth for leaders? And what I used to say is, I hope so. I hope so. I'm looking for it. I felt like Ponce de Leon. I'm looking for that fountain of youth. Well, this third choice is it. Smart leaders choose to fuel curiosity. It's how we maintain relevance and vitality in a changing world. Now, there's so much that could be said here. Let me just give you some ideas on how you can fuel curiosity. Perhaps you need to have some curiosity conversations. I've got an entire chapter in the book on how to do that and some other recommended resources. Who are you talking to? Who are you listening to? Who are you spending time with? And if you'll be strategic, and if you'll be deliberate, and if you'll be intentional about broadening those men and women that you spend time with, broadening that circle, you'd be shocked and amazed and so thankful as what you could learn in these conversations. Another idea, experiential learning. Some of you, that's your style and that's your preference, but you have to make the choice. You have to engage in those activities. I know a guy that, 25, 30 years ago, built a website because he wanted to learn about the World Wide Web. So he thought that was a good way for him to learn. He's not the kind of guy that'd go to a conference or read a book. He had to do something hands-on. Some of you are experiential learners, but you got to make that choice. Some of you like to read. The typical CEO is reading between 80 and 100 books a year. That doesn't have to be your path, but that's a tremendous way to fuel curiosity. Some of you are going to fuel your curiosity in relationships, whether it be with friends or colleagues or family or coaches or mentors or peer groups, but you learn best in context of relationship. If that's your path, you need to walk it. But the one I want to spend just a minute on, I'm watching our clock here, and this is one of my personal favorites, so I've got a bias, and I know we've got some crew folks here, so you've heard this before, but it's this idea of using questions as a tool to fuel curiosity. Love this, love this, love this. I'm reminded of a talk that Jim Collins did. Jim Collins, Good to Great. He's a friend of our organization. He's been with us, met with us several times, spoken at our annual event several times. And in one of those talks, he challenged all of us. There are probably 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 folks in the room. And he asked us to think about how many questions we ask and how many statements we'd make in a typical day. He called it our question to statement ratio. So we're all kind of pondering that. And he says, I think you need to double the number of questions. We're all sitting there thinking about it. While we're literally processing it, he waited, a beat and a half, 2 beats, and then he said, and then double it again. Take the number of questions you ask in a day and double it, and then double it again. This was a defining moment for so many people in our organization that realized that we didn't ask enough questions. Again, I've devoted an entire chapter in the new book to this topic. It's called Ask, Don't Tell. And then I would say parenthetically, whenever possible, certainly as leaders, there'll be times when we tell. But what's our go-to? What's our go-to? I want to encourage you to approach questions. If this helps you, approach it like a game. Why don't you try to collect questions? Why don't you see how many you can collect? When I go to the beach with my granddaughter and she wants to collect shells and she wants to count them and see how many she got. Or my grandson who likes to collect little cars, and from time to time he'll want to count them because he's learning to count. What if you said, how many questions can I collect between now and my last breath? Wouldn't that be fun? You'd be a better leader if you not only collected them, but if you used them. Think of it like putting arrows in your quiver. So let me share just a few of my favorites, because I couldn't not share a few of my favorites, because what you're going to find is that, and you know this already, but you'll be reminded hopefully today, is that different questions serve different purposes. It's like a Phillips head screwdriver versus a flathead screwdriver, right? You use what the situation demands. And the more tools you've got, the more likely you are to have the one that you need. So here are a few. I'll start with the question that I ask most often. On a good day, I ask it repeatedly throughout the day. And that is specifically, what are we trying to accomplish? Specifically, what are we trying to accomplish? This helps me maintain an outcome orientation, a strategic orientation. I want to say that before this webinar. I want to say this before I send an email. I want to say this before a one-on-one meeting or an encounter. It could revolutionize your leadership if you tried to keep yourself focused on those desired outcomes and help your team. Because I can't tell you how many times I've asked that question at the beginning of a meeting or even a specific agenda item. I'll say, okay, so what are we trying to accomplish with this? And it's been a revelation in so many situations. So that's my favorite question, multi-use question. How about in an interview context? I love to ask the question, what question do you have for me? You can learn so much about someone by the questions they ask. I love to ask that question. Now, if we're in a strategic planning session, which I love strategic planning, you may or may not be surprised by that, because leadership's about the future. So I like to think about what is it we're trying to do here. And the question that I ask, and we've been asking around here for many years, is what do we want to be true in a decade that's not true today? What do we want to be true in a decade that's not true today? I think that's a great organizational question. I think it's a great team question. I think it's a great personal question. It can apply to our finances, to our relationships, to our fitness, but it keeps you oriented on the future so that the rest is just execution. Another question, if we're problem solving, I like to ask, what have others done in similar circumstances? What have others done in similar circumstances? And again, sometimes you'll find they did things that worked, and sometimes you'll find they did things that didn't work. You can learn from both. Just one more, we got to move on. If you're trying to communicate a message, particularly if there's any level of complexity in that message, I think a great question is, how would I explain this to a small child? And I've actually gone and taken messages to small children to see if they get it. And if they don't get it, I don't feel like I've simplified it enough. Here's the bottom line for me. As I use questions to fuel my own curiosity, the more questions I ask, the better I lead. It might be true for you as well. All right, so we're on to the fourth and final choice. Some of you are looking at your clock and going, how are we doing on time? We're doing good. Because I don't have a lot to offer here. It's very critical. It's very critical. These choices, by the way, are not intended to be linear or sequential. Now, they do create a virtuous cycle. And I would even say the choice to confront reality is probably the first among equals. But this fourth choice is the one that makes all the difference. I mean, the subtitle of the book is, how are you going to scale your impact? How are you going to scale your impact? If you do the first three choices and stop, you will not scale your impact. In fact, you'll lose ground. The fourth choice, stated as simply as we possibly could, is smart leaders choose to create change. Progress is always preceded by change. Progress is always preceded by change. And leaders know that. Now, sometimes we forget that in the midst of the quicksand. And we might look at change as a barrier or an obstacle or a nuisance or a liability or a burden. Change is our job. Leaders, we're paid to change the world. We're paid to change the circumstances. We're paid to change the outcomes. We're paid to move people from here to there. It is the essence of a leader's core and fundamental responsibility. And so we've got to have a fresh perspective. It's not about maintenance. It's not about the status quo. We're not trying to control. We're trying to create. It's not about containing. It's about releasing. We're trying to release the potential of people, the potential of an organization to create change, to pursue a preferred future. So You may say, well, why don't I have a lot to add here? Well, I think you got to pull the trigger. I think the first three choices help you. If you confront reality and you've grown your capacity and you fuel curiosity, you still have to create change. You still have to make that choice. It's an independent choice. And like the other choices, it's not something you get to do one time. It's something you have to do over and over, as the other choices, right? These are always on, forever and ever and ever. And you've got to decide what deserves my leadership energy and horsepower in the moment. What are we trying to change? What are we trying to improve? Now, just a couple quick things. Again, this will be a blinding flash to the obvious. I'm going to do it really, 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 really fast. I'm going to say what I just said one more time. Ultimately, to create change is a choice. Now, we don't have any guarantee of our success probability, but we have to try because we're the leader. No team, no individual, no organization has ever drifted to greatness. It's because they were led there. It's because some woman or some man said, here's where we're going. We're going to create change in the world. So one, it is a choice. I don't want you to miss that. It's not an afterthought. It's not a consequence of the other choices. It is its own independent choice. Another thing, if it's significant change, it's probably hard. It's probably hard. We're paid for hard. We're leaders. We're paid for hard. Next thing I'll say is you have got all of the tools you need. You've got the tools. Now, there's a long list of tools. If this were an all-day workshop, we'd kind of unpack those. But you've got goals, you've got vision, you've got measurement, you've got accountability, you've got resources of some sort, you've got teams of either paid staff or volunteers, you've got all kind of resources. You've got the tools. But see, the power in a tool is not in the tool. It's in the hand of the craftsperson that wields it. So I don't think you need to be looking for new tools. I think you need to figure out how to pull out the ones you've already got, dust them off, put them to work, and maybe you need to get better with some of them. Maybe you need to get better at vision casting or problem solving or team building, but you don't need new tools. That's my bet, or you wouldn't be on this webinar today. My final encouragement to you on this idea of creating change is to be as clear and as specific as possible regarding what you're trying to accomplish. I've got an entire chapter in the book called See the Unseen. Again, that's part of our job. We've got to see it before other people see it. What we're actually trying to create, it actually doesn't exist. Sort of, because it's in our mind and it's in our heart, so it does exist. But in the real world, it doesn't exist yet. And so you've got to be crystal clear if you're going to rally people to go there. So those are the four choices. First choice, confront reality. Second choice, you've got to grow capacity. Third choice, fuel curiosity. And the fourth choice, the one that brings it all home, you've got to create change. And then when you do, you get to go back and you get to confront the new reality. And that's what we do as leaders. So I'm going to stop at that point, see if we can take a few questions. Becky, I got through that as quick as I could.
Yeah, you did amazing. And what I want to say is I feel like we can start the new year now. I don't know if anybody's on the call who had a rough first week of work last week. I did. I was sick. You can probably still hear it in my voice, but you've infused us with this energy and enthusiasm for the difference we can make as leaders. And I feel like this is just what I needed to start the new year strong. So thank you, Mark. And we do have several questions that have come in the chat. We will get to as many of these as we can. But just to give you all a preview of how we're going to spend the rest of this hour together, we're going to take as many questions as we can. At a certain point, I'm going to do a quick break commercial for some things that you can do to support Mark's launch this week. Here's a clue: buy a copy of Smart Leadership for someone who might benefit from it, and review the book starting tomorrow on Amazon. So we'll do a quick commercial after we've done some Q&A, but then Mark has some parting inspiration that he wants to send us all out with. So I would encourage you to stay for every single minute that you can. because you don't want to miss that send off that Mark's going to do at the end of the call. So thanks to those of you who are putting questions in, and Wendy, who is providing some amazing support on chat today, has put some questions in that you all are sharing. So I'm going to start with this question from Trina. Trina is wondering, Mark, how do you create a culture shift in a large organization when you face old mindset at the top and new leaders at the lower levels of the organization?
Okay, well, nothing like an easy question to start. You said this was from Trina. Thank you, Trina. Great question. So let me give a quick word. I love Q&A, and it gives me a little angst because I don't want any of you to misinterpret the brevity of my response with the significance of your question. That is a huge question. And I will also say that my team has been working the last few years. We have conducted a global survey on the topic of change. We've talked to over 5,000 folks in 10 countries, and we're trying to figure out about culture and about change. And so that's work that's going to come in the future. Let me say this, and I don't mean this in any way to doubt that you've already done this, Trina, but you got to bloom where you're planted. You got to bloom where you're planted. You've got to influence what you can influence. And I think I heard in the question, you've got some young emerging leaders, some new leaders. That's probably fertile ground for your influence. So yes, you'll continue to try to influence and lead up. I think we should all work diligently at leading up. I was doing that today. I think I do that often. I think we should all lead up with the right mindset, the right attitude, and the right spirit. But we need to help our leaders be successful. In fact, that's the career advice I always give people when they say, how do I have a great and flourishing career? I said, make your boss wildly successful. So one, I would say lead up, bloom where you're planted, and see what you can do to help those young emerging leaders. Because in my experience, young emerging leaders will take all the help they can get. So there's a whole lot more, but hopefully that'll give you a few things to think about.
Thank you, Mark. I have a couple of questions that I'm going to combine here. So Kent is asking, what is one of your favorite strategies to create margin for yourself? And and Jennifer is asking, when you have created that margin, that time that you've scheduled for yourself, what do you do during that time? So maybe we can try to answer those two together.
Okay. Well, again, there are a half dozen immediate strategies. I've listed them in the book, and there are even more. The main thing is to carve out dedicated time, whether it's a morning review, a daily review at the end of the day. There are any number of strategies and tactics. So one size will not fit all. And I would also say that it may need to change in different seasons of your career, seasons of your life. You may not be able to do things the way you would prefer in an ideal circumstance. My favorite, and I'm very fortunate that I've grown up in a culture that honors this, is probably 35 years ago, I was introduced to the discipline of taking one day a month. My leader called it a library day. I call it a focus day. And as my responsibilities have grown, I've tried to go to two. Now, let me say this about going to two. Part of it was I kept losing one or losing part of one for a meeting or a call. And so I historically have tried to schedule 2 days a month so that I can certainly get one day net out of that. But again, how much time you need depends on your circumstances. How big's your goal? How big are your challenges? How much responsibility you have? The CEOs are spending 28% of every week, their working week, alone. So I don't know if that's your answer or not. Okay, what do? I try to pick a topic, and sometimes I'll make a list of things and save them for my focus days, because there's some stuff you just can't do in the shower or driving to work. I mean, it's on your mind, but you can't do deep thought, right? You're trying not to run off the road or whatever. And so I'll actually make a list. I got that from one of my mentors. He calls it his deep thinking list, and he's always putting things on it. And then when he has this dedicated time for margin, he'll take something. And again, this is not a template, but categorically, you want to reflect on the past. You want to assess what has worked and what has not worked. You want to think about the future, right? You want to begin creating those plans to create a preferred and different future. See, margin is our time machine. When we enter it, we can go back and we can go into the future. You just need dedicated time to do that.
Thank you for that, Mark. And I feel like I could ask you questions about margin all day. So I appreciate you taking the time to share. So, a question from Kitty. Mark, although I am a leader in my organization, I do not manage people. Are there any areas of these four choices which would not apply to someone who does not manage people?
I don't think so. Now, you may say, well, creating change is hard if you don't manage people, but you can influence decisions. I would hope you have influence in your organization, and perhaps that's what you need to work on growing so that you'll have more influence. But I cannot imagine that one might be the hardest, right? Because yeah, I go through the others. You can do those whether you have anyone reporting to you or a million people reporting to you. Creating change without a span of control or people under your leadership would probably be more challenging. But still, I think you need to figure out what are those changes that you need to influence and then create conscious and purposeful strategies to influence the change that you want to initiate.
Thank you, Mark. Here's another question about creating change from Patno, who says, wow, thanks to start of 2022. So how do I drive change that I can see but others cannot see? I am in middle management. How do I change? How do I engage up and down to drive that change? And Mark, I think you should give a sneak preview for the 2023 book.
Okay, so let me yes. Yeah, I think that would be the 2024 book, but I'll do that too. So here's the deal. Again, another huge question. So I appreciate the significance of the question. People only change for one of three reasons: vision, pain, or fear of future consequences. Vision, pain, or fear of future consequences. I think we've got to steward those levers thoughtfully, and we need to get real good. It sounds like from in your circumstances on the vision casting piece, and you've just got to stay at it. You've got to stay at it. It's exhausting, right? I mean, I've driven a lot of change in our organization over 40 years, and none of the significant change has been easy. I started about 30 years ago under the authority and the edict. I'm looking for the right word. The president of our company came to me about 30 years ago, and he said he wanted us to be a team-based organization. I've been working on that for 30 years. And about half our restaurants are team-based, which you can debate whether that's good or not. Now, keep in mind, all of our restaurants are independently operated. And so we sell, we don't tell. We've been casting vision for teams for 30 years, and we've got about half of them. So again, you can decide if that's good or bad. You just got to stay on it. Somebody said, well, why do you stay on it? I said, well, if something's true and something's valid, I mean, unless I'm told not to by someone that I'm under their authority, I figure those are my standing orders, right? And so you don't even have, it sounds like, the benefit of standing orders. This may be things that you see, and maybe you see alone: vision, pain, or fear of future consequences. Can you tell a story about what happens if we don't change this? And I'm not saying the sky's falling, gloom and doom, unless that's true. Then you got to get good at telling that story as well. It's the why we can't stay here story. So hang in there. Again, I've got a chapter in the book called See the Unseen, and there's a whole section on vision casting. I did some work several years ago for an organization. They had 12,000 members in this organization, as I recall, around the world. They said their number one question from their membership was, how do I cast vision? How do I cast vision? Most folks can only think of one or two or three ways. I did a talk for an organization called 57 Ways to Communicate Vision. And that's not all of them. You have got to figure out ways to keep telling that story over and over and over again.
Thank you so much, Mark. So I have a question from Nathan. He's wondering which choice has been the most impactful in your leadership journey? Which choice is more impactful for younger leaders? And what about veteran leaders?
Great question. Let me think about that. See, these are new questions. See, the book hadn't come out yet. So You're like the second group to give me questions. So thank you for helping me think new thoughts here. Um,
So, Mark, while you're thinking about that, I do want to let everyone know that coming up on January 24th, we're going to have a special virtual live celebration for the Smart Leadership book. And you'll actually have the chance to join Mark face to face on a Zoom meeting and ask more of the questions that we may not get to today. Wendy is going to go ahead and drop that registration link in the chat. We would love to have you join us. We're going to have refreshments, we're going to have giveaways. So we hope you'll mark your calendar and join us again for more Q&A face-to-face on January 24th. Hopefully that gave you time to think.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was actually excited about the virtual launch party and the giveaways and the refreshments. So I'm sorry. Let me come back.
The most impactful choice of your leadership journey.
Well, let me say this. What we've learned is the best leaders make these 4 choices. So when my leadership, there have been seasons when I have struggled. There have been seasons when I was in the quicksand. Make no mistake about it. And it's because I failed to make one of these choices. So it's almost like, which of your children is your favorite child? I think you need all 4. Here's what I would say, though. I think for some leaders, I'll speak for myself, you will gravitate to one choice perhaps before you gravitate to another. I personally gravitate toward this idea of fueling curiosity. I love to learn. I love to grow because let me, this is another story. So I gotta make this brief. I'm not a natural learner by temperament or style or personality. Some of you've taken strength finders and learner is one of those. Somebody told me recently, they said, I bet learner's in your top 5. I don't think it's in my top 25. And then they said, well, you act like a learner. And I said, well, thanks. I made a decision over 40 years ago that I would pursue lifelong learning. And I think that has reignited this spirit of curiosity that I think is in all of us, particularly in our early years. And then the world kind of beats it out of us. But over 40 years ago, I came to the realization that my capacity to grow would determine my capacity to lead. My capacity to grow would determine my capacity to lead. So I made a choice to feel curiosity. I made a choice to become a lifelong learner. Hey, it's just us. Let me tell you the truth. I'd rather listen to the radio in the car than I would a podcast or a book. I have a choice to make. And if I want to continue to grow my capacity to lead, if I want to drink from that fountain of youth so that I can lead until my last breath, I made that choice. And so because I am so resolute in that choice, I think that's perhaps the easiest of the 4 for me. You didn't ask this, but growing capacity is the hardest for me because I want to serve leaders and I want to do more. And I want to say yes to stuff. And there's probably some pleaser in there somewhere. And so that one's hard. And I have to think about that a lot to be sure that I've got the capacity to execute on all of my responsibilities and actually create positive change.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're going to take one final question. This one came in from Chip, and he's wondering, are innovative companies organized more around culture and values or more around structure and systems? Granted, both are important.
Yeah, I like the granted both are important. The 23 book, I was confused there, is a book on culture. The 24 book is a book on change. And what I would tell you is your question foreshadows the answer, is that every organization that wants to scale needs appropriate structure. However, if innovation is not valued, if that is not part of the stated aspiration, if it is not amplified by leaders, people always watch the leader, and if the organization doesn't adapt over time, then they won't be innovative and the problem will not be the structure. So it is a dance, but I can only imagine a truly innovative organization without structure. And I can't imagine what would happen. I don't know how long they would survive. And I have seen organizations that put too much emphasis and priority on structure, and what they lose is innovation. Here at Chick-fil-A about 15 years ago, our senior leaders decided we needed to intentionally, strategically turn up the volume on innovation. We had plenty of systems and structures. So in tandem, I think it's a very powerful, it's a powerful combination.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. And I promised a commercial break. So I do want to let you all know the most important ways that you can help us reach more readers with this message. So I know several of you on the call commented that you already have seen the book, you've gotten an advance copy. For those of you who have already had a chance to read the book, we would value your review on Amazon, which you'll be able to post beginning tomorrow. The book is not able to be reviewed on Amazon until it's live and available, and that big day is launch day tomorrow. So please, if you've already read the book, be prepared to leave a review on Amazon. Only a few sentences will help other leaders discover the value in this book. The other thing that you can do today is to pre-order a copy of the book. You might already have one. My pre-ordered copy is on the way. I can't wait to share it with another leader. And I hope that you'll take that step today and go ahead and pre-order a copy of Smart Leadership for someone who might benefit from it. I also want to let you know that there are several other resources on the Smart Leadership topic that are coming soon. Mark, would you want to take a moment before your closing remarks to let folks know about the other resources that are coming soon?
Yes, really quick. I am so excited. As excited as I am about the book, I don't know if I should even say this, I'm more excited about this resource. I've never done anything like it. It's called Smart Leadership in Action, and it's a journal where we take about 250 words a day. Think of it as a short blog post and a few open-ended questions to take leaders through the book. And I am so excited. That's going to be available in about 2 weeks or so. So jazzed by that. And we'll create a field guide, which we've done historically. And we'll create quick start guides. There's an assessment. We'll have a full suite of resources. But this idea of taking it into bite-sized pieces, we'll take a paragraph or two from the book, we'll unpack it and give you some things that you can think about and things you can do personally to take people on that journey of application. I couldn't be any more excited about that. Smart Leadership in Action.
I did see a question come in to chat about bulk orders and whether there's a discount available. There are discounts available. So Mark's website, Mark Miller Leadership, has some bulk purchase possibilities. You can also visit Porchlight Books for bulk sale options related to this book of Smart Leadership. So Mark, I'm going to kick it back to you for some parting inspiration.
Okay. Well, even before the inspiration, I've got one more administrative thing. I wish I could have gotten to more questions. So here's my cell number, 678-612-8441. 678-612-8441. If you text me a question, I'll get back to you. It might take a few days. Lots of you out there, but I'd love to serve you any way I can.
And Mark, I think that we can probably work with you to get some answers up on Instagram or LinkedIn soon to some of the questions that we didn't have a chance to get to.
Good. That'd be fantastic. All right. So let me close with this. We got 2 minutes. I started with a movie reference with the Indiana Jones story. I want to take you to the movies one more time. Now, this is a movie that young people have seen, Harry Potter. In fact, there are 100 Harry Potter movies, right? I mean, it just on and on and on. Fantastic story, great books, great storytelling, great cinematography. I want to take you to what I believe was one of the most significant and most pivotal moments in the entire story of 8 or 10 movies. And if you saw the movies, you remember this scene. It's Harry's 12th birthday, and Hagrid has come to pick him up and take him to Hogwarts so that he can learn more about his powers and develop his wizardry skills, right? So here's the fundamental problem. Harry does not know that he's a wizard. And Hagrid is the one that says, in a totally understated way, he said, Harry, you're a wizard. Well, I'm so excited as we begin this new year that I'm the guy that gets to tell you you're a wizard too. And you don't even have to go to Hogwarts. You have a superpower. You can change lives with your choices. 4 of them specifically. You need to choose to confront reality. You need to choose to grow capacity. You need to choose to fuel curiosity. And you need to choose to create change. And when you do, you will scale your impact. And I want to be here to cheer you on. Good luck.